everyone for indulging us lunch. We'll come back to order. Next order of business is PZ 19-007. Ms. Nunn, will you read the docket, please?
Yes, sir. Docket PZ-19-007, application has been filed by Westcott Construction for the approval of the preliminary subdivision plan with waiver, Section 5.3 residential street. What is that? Hierarchy. For 9 lots on approximately 78.42 acres to be known as Flat Rock Estates. The property is located at Goshen Lane and Plantation Boulevard, Goshen. The zoning is R2 Residential District and CO1 Conservation Residential District.
Thank you, Shelley. My name is Tom McIntyre. I'm a senior planner here at Oldham County Planning and Development. So as Shelley stated, the application has been filed with Westcott Construction for a preliminary subdivision plan and waiver in Section 536D for residential street hierarchy on approximately 80 acres known as Flat Rock Estates. Zoning is CO1 and R2. Here highlighted in red is the subject parcel. It's an aerial picture. In addition, we have a current zoning map. As far as site history is concerned, on January 22nd of 2019, the Oldham County Planning Commission denied a request for an 80-lot preliminary open space subdivision plan on approximately 78.83 acres to be known as Goshen Place. It is important to note that this is a different applicant than the previous submittal. The waiver request, the applicant has requested a waiver of Section 536D residential street hierarchy. The length of the cul-de-sac exceeds the allowable 1,200 feet. Excuse me. By providing a dedicated turnaround in front of Lot 8, the applicant has attempted to mitigate the impact that the length of the cul-de-sac would have on the users of the private road. Here is the proposed turnaround. So from this point all the way down, it's roughly about 1,200 feet. That's what the waiver is about. This project will be served by a conventional septic system. Once the permitting stage begins for individual lots, a site evaluation will be performed to determine the specific location of the on-site septic system. The applicant is proposing 3 detention basins on site to manage the stormwater and will be required to submit a stormwater management plan to the county engineer's office for review and approval. Here we have 1, 2, and 3. Given that 9 lots are proposed, the development does not meet the threshold for traffic analysis requirements. In order to improve the safety of Goshen Lane, the applicant is proposing to improve the site distance curves located at the 1500 and 1520 blocks of Goshen Lane. Here we have site distance curve number 1, or site distance improvement curve number 1. The applicant is improving the site distance by 56 feet by clearing underbrush, removal of 1 to 2 trees, and striping the center line. Site distance curve, or site distance improvement curve number 2. The applicant is improving the site distance by 50 feet by relocating the existing wood fence in the right-of-way, trimming the trees in the right-of-way, and striping the center line. So here we are looking west down Goshen Lane at 42 towards Louisville. Looking south across US 42 is the Goshen General Store. East view shows Goshen Lane at US 42 looking towards LaGrange Buckner. This side depicts the north view of Goshen Lane at 42. As we move forward, here's Cliffwood Drive. And Cliffwood Drive is approximately 830 feet north of the Goshen Lane. Here we have Valley Drive, where the curb and gutter starts, which is roughly right about there. Here we are approaching the first curve of Goshen Lane, which is kind of right about here. And please make sure to notate the trees right there. We will get a better picture on this next go. So here's site distance improvement curve number 1. As I just mentioned previously, here's the 2 trees that are in question. Here's site distance improvement curve number 2. Please be sure to notate the existing fence in the right-of-way there, in addition to the fence here. So as we travel north on Goshen Lane, You can see it's, narrows down. Here we have Plantation Boulevard, which is the entrance to Taylor Creek Woods. Here's the proposed entrance to the subdivision, in addition to it being the proposed construction entrance, I believe. Here's a south view from the subdivision entrance towards 42, and here's a north view. In summary, the applicant is asking for a waiver of section 536B for the cul-de-sac length and approval of a preliminary subdivision plan. The proposed binding elements are to fill the shoulder of the 14-foot wide roadway along the developer's frontage, roughly 50 to 100 feet in length, to improve the sight distance of curve number 1 located at the 1500 block of Goshen Lane by 56 feet, as displayed by sight distance exhibit dated 4/18/19, which includes clearing underbrush, removal of 1 to 2 trees, and striping of center line. Number 3 would be to improve the sight distance of curve number 2, located at the 1520 block of Goshen Lane by 50 feet as displayed in the sight distance exhibit dated 4/18/19, which includes relocating the existing wood fence in the right-of-way, trimming the trees in the right-of-way, and striping the center line. The 4th would be the approval applies only to the plan presented at the April 23rd, 2019 Oldham County Planning Commission public hearing, and the preliminary plan must comply with the established federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements at the time of said approval. Be more than happy to entertain any questions at this point.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Any further input from staff? Questions for staff? Hang on. Jim, are you going to tell us?
I can just add that these are preliminary plans for the planning and zoning portion or stage, and construction plans, as we've discussed, will have to address all stormwater ordinance, all other construction standards in accordance with county ordinance and regulations. So that'll come to our office later for review. The binding elements that you see here were discussed between county offices, engineering planning with the applicant, and we agree with what they presented here. It'll improve the site distance. It'll improve the width at a kind of an hourglass portion or constricted portion in the road, give a little bit better base for the vehicles that are already traveling off the paved path. So these are what we've discussed and coordinated with the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Silliman. Questions for staff? Mr. Falvey?
Just one. How far, the horse fencing that you're moving in 2 areas, how far back is that going to?
I will defer that to the applicant.
Yeah, and they're going to present an exhibit. You'll see that in their presentation.
Further questions for staff? Okay, there being none, we'll move into the presentation from the applicant. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre.
Tom, change up. Okay. Yeah, there's fans blowing back there. You just have to move forward.
Yep. Thank you.
Do we need to get your team sworn in?
I think you do.
Okay, let's go ahead and take care of that before we get you out of the gate.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Just remember to speak up. There are fans that circulate air in here, and you're probably speaking well enough, but back in the audience, it's hard to hear.
Okay. Okay, they moved up. All right. Thank you very much. Members of the commission, Mr. Chairman, my name is Cliff Ashburner. I'm with the law firm of Dinsmore and Scholl. Our address is 101 South 5th Street, Suite 2500, Louisville 40202. And I'm here today on behalf of Westcott Construction. Brooke Veeman and Wes Johnson from Westcott are here, and they're available to answer questions as you have questions directed toward them. And Derek Triplett and Eric Sen from Land Design and Development, the land planning firm that worked with Westcott to draw the plan you see before you, are here as well. They can answer land planning and engineering questions should you have some of them. We have provided for each of you in hard copy form a proposed motion to approve and binding elements. The evidence that we have already submitted into the record and the evidence that we're going to highlight today supports the motion, and obviously the binding elements you heard in the staff report. So keep that in mind. Feel free to peruse this during the presentation, and then obviously we would love if you adopted it verbatim, but understand that you're an independent group, and so adopt parts of it as you will. So what we'd like to do is, I want to go through some kind of a little bit of history, not too much history on the previous case, because I know that's all fresh in your minds. Wes Johnson's lived in this area, lived in the community for a very long time, and actually has leased this property for recreational purposes for many years. And after the previous proposal was denied, was contacted by the owner about, is there something that you might be able to do with the property that would be more in keeping with the rest of Goshen Lane, and something that people in the area would be happy about. And so Wes set about designing what is now known as the Enclave at Goshen. I apologize, the previous name was Flat Rock Estates. We'd prefer to call it the Enclave at Goshen, although I'm not sure that's completely relevant to your subdivision decision today. Just want to make sure that we get that right. And Wes and Westcott Construction is primarily a custom building and commercial construction company. And typically their work is pretty high-end, pretty complex. And so Wes put the same kind of attention toward this property and toward the design that you see here before you. The design of the proposal was really informed by the rural character of Goshen Lane. It was informed a little bit by the conversation that was just had about the property a few months ago, but primarily it was about working with the land and working with the lotting pattern and the other lots in the area to come up with something that really would fit. So I'm going to go through this presentation and talk a little bit about some aspects, and again, all this information has already been submitted through the staff into the record, so I'm going to highlight some things in an effort not to take up the full 50 minutes. I went through the introductions here. This is, you can see the vicinity map, and I think the vicinity map kind of shows the position that this property finds itself in, which I would argue is a transitional position. To the south, you have more kind of suburban, traditional, uniform lot sizes, that kind of a neighborhood feel as you get closer down to 42. And then to the north, you have larger tracts, more estate homes, more of a rural feeling. And so, it really is a choice when you have a property like this, which direction are you going to go? Are you going to go with the larger tracts that are to the north, or are you going to go to the smaller tracts? Obviously, this commission spoke in a way that indicated that perhaps a larger lotting pattern would be preferable, and I think the community finds it preferable, and so that's the pattern you're going to see today. This is the current zoning in the area, and we went ahead and dropped the proposed lot lines within the enclave on this exhibit, so you can see you've got the lotting pattern down here. You can see these lots are a minimum of 5 acres. Obviously, most of them are larger. We have 9 lots on just under 80 acres, so the average lot size is obviously much higher. You've got R2 and you've got the CO zoning. Here you have the curbs that we're going to talk about in a moment as well. The cul-de-sac essentially follows the ridge line of the property. It's where you can do the least amount of disturbance to the land for a roadbed, is to put it in that middle area and then have the homes off of either side. So these are some of the project benefits as we see them. The development style is compatible with rural character. As I said before, putting the road on the ridgeline helps preserve more of the land than you might otherwise find if you were to run roads halfway down the hill or something like that. It'll have a minimal impact on existing utilities and community facilities, really just based on numbers. When you only have 9 homes, there are only so many people who are going to be there. That number of homes will generate, less than 20 trips, as you heard from your staff, less than the threshold for a traffic analysis. And the home style and the value that you'll see on these lots will be more in keeping with what's to the north than the neighborhoods to the south. So when we talk about compatible development style and preserving natural features, this is just a quick comparison of what the zoning ordinance might allow, assuming that you can configure all this on the property. The maximum density of 186 lots, obviously that would come with a fairly large off-site infrastructure improvement and sewer connections, in comparison to what we're showing you today, which is 9 lots, a minimum lot size of 5 acres, and approximately 85% of the land is not going to be disturbed. So it's going to remain wooded except for building sites and things like that. In talking about a lower impact development, you can see here we've got about 5% of the site is covered with impervious surface. And we proposed 3 detention basins that were highlighted by your staff here. This is an area where there was, sort of a response to community concern about drainage. Westcott has agreed to retain more than is typically required by 20%. So oversize those basins so that the water will actually flow off the property more slowly than it does now. So we think that that is a consideration for you when it comes time to make a motion. As far as utility service, as you can see, a secondary flow test was done that demonstrates that this property does have adequate water pressure. So the water pressure is there, wastewater capacity, the soil has been tested by the health department and is found to perk very well. So we think that the lots, in addition to the fact that they're large and there is certainly area on each of these lots for a repair area, that these lots are very suitable for septic systems. The net impact of students, as you can see, is 4. And as far as peak hour trips, additional traffic on the road at that time when everybody else is out on the road, you're looking at about 9 trips. So I would ask that you keep that in mind as we move forward. So now to get to the proposed improvements, and this is an area where we did talk to Mr. Silliman and Mr. Urban about what would be a sort of a rational amount of road improvements given the number of lots and given the character of Goshen Lane and its existing safety condition. And the proposal that I think we've worked toward and now have reached at least some level of agreement on is to improve this 90-degree curve here where you have Goshen Lane. It makes a 90-degree to the right and then a 90-degree to the left before getting up to the entrance to the property, and improving those areas in a way that both improves safety and maintains the rural character of Goshen Lane, which we understand is very important to people in the community. You've seen photos before, but I'll reiterate. This is going into the 90-degree to the right turn, if you will. This is the going north. The tree proposed to be removed here and some of the underbrush cleared out. All of the improvements, the safety improvements that we're talking about today are going to be done within existing right-of-way. This is not about encroaching on anyone's property. This is about working within existing Oldham County right-of-way, which I think is an important point as well. So this is looking north into the curve. This is looking south into the curve. The improvement here would be a striped center lane to keep people on their side of the road. It can be attractive when you're on a country road to kind of use the whole road. We want to keep people on their side of the road and to increase sight distance, as you see on this exhibit. So you've got you really don't have a lot of sight distance when you get to that curve right now. If you're looking straight out of the front of your car, you can see about 30 feet or so of the road. By removing some of this underbrush and removing this, what is now a dead ash tree, you'll more than double that sight distance. So you will greatly increase the amount of around the curve that you have the ability to see when you're heading north. Now looking to curve 2, this is the hard left. You've got the fence and the trees here. These are in the right-of-way, and so the proposal is just to relocate that fence. Kind of, if it's a curve right now, you would just sort of chop a little bit of it off, basically relocate it behind the line of trees in order to, again, increase that sight distance as you're heading to the proposed development. And you can see that here. This is where the existing fence is. You can see it in the yellow here. And we would basically move it out of that yellow so it would get to here and corner and come straight across and then pick right back up where it was. The trees will remain in the right-of-way. They're not proposed to be removed, but they are proposed to be limbed up a little bit so that a driver can see better around that. And again, these improvements are within Oldham County right-of-way. They're not on anybody's private property. And here that would greatly increase the sight distance. So those are the safety improvements. The one roadway condition improvement that you heard about was essentially adding a gravel shoulder where currently there's an earth shoulder adjacent to Goshen Lane to allow that to remain a little bit longer. As far as the homes that are proposed here, with this many lots, which is not many, on 80 acres, you're looking at larger homes. And as I said at the very beginning of our presentation, Westcott is a custom builder. And so these are going to be larger, more private than you might find in a traditional neighborhood. And that's just a different customer. It's not necessarily better or worse. It's just a different kind of customer who wants the privacy, who wants a larger home and wants more property, frankly. And so that's the difference between what was previously proposed and what you see now. That's also a little bit of the difference between the neighborhoods just to the south and what you see here. These are proposed deed restrictions, just to give you an idea of the kinds of homes that would be built here. Obviously, we've got a 5-acre minimum lot size. There will be architectural standards. There will be minimum floor areas, and you can see it's 2,800 square feet for a 1-story, 3,200 for a 2-story. No short-term rentals, so no Airbnb units. I don't know if that's something that Oldham County is struggling with. I know other counties in our area are. A maximum build-out period, and then obviously providing for common maintenance, because the cul-de-sac that we've shown is a private road, and we intend for it to remain that way and to be maintained by the residents of the enclave. So the waiver request that we have for you is the length of the cul-de-sac. And as was described in the justification that was submitted with the application, as is described in the proposed motion, the lay of this land really does not lend itself to having 2 access points to this property. It just doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about trying to preserve, again, rural character, trying to limit the amount of disturbance on the property, to create a loop road that would really impact a lot more of the property, when we have the opportunity to create a small bubble at about 1,200 feet to provide for that turnaround and follow the natural course of the land. As you can see, even though we do have a fairly large piece of property at the point closest to the bubble there, it is quite narrow, and so it would eat up a lot more of the property if we were to have to create a loop road on the property. So that's why the waiver is there. And obviously, we are not going to have daily trips anywhere near 250. This is just a writing of the waiver justification. You all have this in your proposed motion. We think, again, the dedicated turnaround at 1,200 square feet is a good mitigation. The existing condition of the land and its relative narrowness is also something for you to consider. Here we have just a written justification about conformance with the comprehensive plan. You can see that this plan is designed, as I said before, when you look at this property, you look at the properties to the north of it, you look at the properties to the south of it, the proposed development really provides for a good transition between what you would consider more traditional suburban, uniform lot size sort of neighborhoods and the more rural, larger tracts to the north. And so that really touches on the land use elements, or land use goals rather, I'm sorry. And then providing for the roadway improvements addresses the transportation goal. And obviously we've talked about the availability of utilities, specifically water, and the ability of the site to handle stormwater and then sanitary sewer. We talked about the environmental impacts, or the relatively limited environmental impacts, and the genesis of the design, the desire to impact the property as little as possible. And then the proposed binding elements, I know your staff read those for you. I don't think we need to go through those. Additionally, the last one, I'm not sure if this was mentioned by the staff, but no other division of the lots that would create additional lots will occur without coming back through the Planning Commission. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I know we did receive one email of support that you should have on your screen in front of you. There may be others who are here to speak in support. I know we had a few who came with us this morning, but ultimately got pulled away. So with that, I believe we've provided sufficient evidence in writing before today and highlighted that evidence for you today to justify the waiver of the cul-de-sac length and to demonstrate both compliance with the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations and your comprehensive plan so that you can approve the preliminary subdivision plan.
Thank you, Mr. Ashburner. We'll circle back with questions
Okay.
momentarily, okay? Is there anyone else here present who would like to provide testimony or evidence in support of this application? Speaking in support. All right, being none, we'll move into testimony and question by those who are in opposition to this application. Does anyone please approach? Support or opposed? Support, please come forward.
Okay. Do my time again.
We're going to need to get you sworn in, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Oh,
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
yes, I do.
Name and address.
My name is Lisa LaRocca. I'm at 2201 Goshen Lane. So I spoke with you when we gathered this last time when Pulte had the proposal for the 80-lot subdivision. So I just thought it was only fitting that I step up and tell you what my communication has been with the residents along Goshen Lane that was active in the support against the proposal that Pulte had brought to the table. I do know that several people were here earlier this morning, and your first case that was on the docket went a little longer than we had planned. So I have known Wes Johnson for a number of years, being a fellow resident along Goshen Lane, and he also assisted us with some projects at our property, Goshen Crest Farm. Having sat here this morning and reviewed the proposal that's just been presented to us, and also speaking with Wes this morning, we do support the project. Our main concern, obviously, was not being against development previously. It was against the number of houses that was proposed by Pulte Development. I do think that the 9 homes that are presented does fit within the look of Goshen Lane, what we're trying to do to preserve Goshen Lane. I think the fact that Wes has been involved with Goshen Lane for a number of years, that does give us some level of comfort that he has our best interest at heart and that he's not going to do anything that will be detrimental to the residents along Goshen Lane, to our families, and to the look of Goshen Lane. I do know that with regard to 1520 and what's being done there to improve the safety aspect of that S-curve, there are some concerns by that homeowner at that residence. She has reached out to me. I encouraged her to call Mr. Johnson or to call Brooke and to talk with them specifically about that. Her concerns is just to protect her property, not necessarily with the development. So that's all I have. I just wanted to, again, just to speak out in support of this. I think that they've done their homework. And again, just to say that we're not opposed to that land being developed. We know it's going to be developed at some point, and we think that Westcott Construction might have the right plan today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LaRocca. Is anyone else present who wishes to speak in support? Please approach. We'll need to get you sworn as
Joyce
well.
Fletcher.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do, and my
Name and
friend,
address.
pardon? Joyce Fletcher. I live at 1600 Goshen Lane. And so we're the adjacent property owners to the proposed development by Mr. Johnson. And I too was significantly involved in the opposition to the Pulte subdivision. It was just too many homes on very small lots in a very rural area with not enough consideration for preservation of not just the property, but also the safety and security of Goshen Lane. I attended the neighborhood meeting that Wes Johnson had at the North Oldham Fire Department. And so my primary concern for being here today was to just be assured that what he presented to you all was exactly what he presented to us. And I find that to be true. And so I'm also very pleased with this subdivision and think it will only add to the area. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you,
So,
Ms.
thank
Fletcher.
you.
All right, anyone else present who wishes to speak on behalf of the applicant? All right, there being none, we'll move into next segment, which is testimony and questions by those opposing the application. Is anyone present who wishes to provide testimony or evidence in opposition? All right, being none, we'll move along into questions from the commission. Commissioners, questions?
Before you start, I just got one clarification. In the presentation by the applicant, they said there was a net of 4 students. The student capacity form from the Board of Education said 5.
I apologize.
One more. So just for clarification, I know somebody might have picked that up anyway.
Mr. Falvey?
This is more curiosity. What will these lots sell for, roughly?
So we're trying to determine that
We're going to
Come
be, so relevance, can we? Okay.
Want to answer, you
All
can,
right,
but
that's
not
fine.
really- You really aren't. That's really not a question that the
Disregard.
commission is supposed to answer.
now. We're trying to figure that out ourselves, to be honest with you. So,
No problem.
Just name and address for the record. since you-
Wes Johnson, 3341 North Buckeye Lane.
All right, thanks. One other question. Everything is going to be done by septic tank, is that right?
That's correct.
And that's already, you said that they've run tests already and it does
Yes.
perk and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions from the commission? Crickets. All right. Mr. Ashburner, there being no opposition testimony, I would assume that we're not going to have a need for rebuttal.
I don't think you do.
Do you have a final statement to provide to the commission?
I believe I summarized our position already. I don't think I need to make any more statements.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Mr. Urban?
I just have one question, though, before you sit down. The
Yes.
binding elements that Mr. McIntyre put up in the staff report, we've kind of rewritten from what you submitted. Do you agree to those 5 binding elements? I'm going to have, Tom, if you would put them back up on the screen, I'd appreciate it. That's what I was going to say. They are written differently than what you submitted. Says the same thing, but
Give me a minute, I'll read them and I'll tell you. Here we go. I think we're okay with the binding
I
elements.
think the first 3 are basically what you said. The 4th and the 5th are our standard. We always say the same thing in terms of approval only applies to the plan today. And then that means you're putting in your deed restrictions that you're not going to allow further subdivision without plan approval. That was in your binding element.
Yes.
This is really saying the same thing. And then we add that you must comply with all other federal, state, and county ordinances. Stormwater ordinance, all that kind of stuff is relevant, so we
We would
just
have to
add
do
in.
that, yeah, anyway.
Thank you.
Yes.
There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. Okay, that will close our public input section of the hearing. Mr. Urban, question?
Put up the waiver request.
Should we,
It's not in the staff report.
are we supposed to take that up first?
Well-
That was the question.
Well,
Thank you.
Tom, please, put up the waiver request, because it's not in the staff report.
There we go.
The slide that has the waiver request, it's about the 4th or 5th slide in. Because you were going to ask me what we're supposed to consider here today.
That
right?
was the question.
There we go.
Specifically, so we're good.
So the first thing is the requested waiver from section 5.3.6, item D, the street, residential street hierarchy in relation to the length of the cul-de-sac. And they've provided some form of mitigation by putting this turnaround about halfway down that cul-de-sac. And so the first item for you to consider is approval or denial of that waiver request. The second item is approval or denial of the preliminary subdivision plan with the binding elements, but we'll go over that next.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
1 sec.
Variance.
Put your microphone.
So procedurally, you want to approve first the request for the waiver, bypassing the request for the variance. You want to do the proposed subdivision plan first?
Well, if they denied the waiver, then the subdivision plan is irrelevant. So we always take the waivers and variances
Maybe if
first.
you
and-
deny the variance, it may be irrelevant too. They may not want to proceed on it. It's
Well-
up to, however you want to proceed. I just want to clarify what we're doing, 1, 2, and 3.
Theoretically, if we just, if they just approve the preliminary subdivision plan, they approve the waiver, but we always take them with the waiver and variances requests first, and then the development plan or subdivision plan, so
Okay.
it's a waiver. Yeah. It's not a variance, right. Waivers or variances, I said, there's no variance in this case, so.
All right, so we will begin with the waiver. Mr. Douglas, did you have a motion to submit?
I will. I'll make a motion that we approve PZ 19007 on the waiver of the section 5.3.6D regarding the residential street hierarchy of the length of the proposed cul-de-sac street exceeds the allowable 1,200 feet. And we accept the applicant's motion, or the request and motion and waiver justification and record that they propose to the Planning Commission for the justification.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Counsel, is that adequate?
Adequate.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? We have multiple seconds. Mr. Falvey, thank you. Discussion? We'll move into roll call vote.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Mr. Finney?
Yes.
Mr. Halfling?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Ms. Nacer?
Yes.
Mr. Elder?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Nunn. Motion carries on a vote of 10 to no. Move into motions for the preliminary plan now. The chair will entertain a motion for the preliminary plan.
Mr.
Davis.
Chairman.
Correction, I believe. On technical review committee meeting, you have on here, it's Highway 22 Goshen. I believe that should be Highway 42 Goshen. This correction that needs to be made to the stuff.
So noted. Do we need to do anything additional with that?
No.
Okay. All right. Were you going to make a motion, Ms. Davis?
I was.
Mr. Douglas, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve PZ-19-007, the preliminary subdivision plan, on that it complies with the objectives that the applicant has proposed and provided to the planning commissioners regarding the comprehensive plan objectives, which is go LU1 and objectives LU1-1. And they continue on with LU2-2 and also objective LU2-1, these are all in comparison of our comprehensive plan. I say that we entered their total their preliminary subdivision justification into record for that, and also that we include the agreed-upon proposed binding elements that was outlined to us, 1 through 5, that was put into record also.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Council, is that an adequate motion?
That'll be fine.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Mr. Hampton, thank you. Discussion? There being none, we'll move into roll call vote. Ms. Nunn?
Ready? Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Nasser?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Elder?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Mr. Finney?
Yes.
Mr. Halfling?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Nunn. Motion carries on a vote of 10 to nothing. As you have your application.
We take a 5-minute break. I've got to reset the equipment in there.
Certainly, we'll go into a 5-minute recess.
You go.